when you lack direction, you'll kind of latch onto anything. And a lot of the things that they're latching onto are the popular stereotypes. So you ask a lot of young men, what do you want to be? What do you want to do? What did they say? I want to be a rapper. I want to be a ball player, right?
I would say, you know what, when I come on here, we always talk about social determinants of health. And so for me, it is what else is happening in their environment that is exacerbating whatever challenge is already there.
What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe show, the home of Epic Conversations. And I'm the host of Epic Conversations 2018 Best Podcast Innovation Award winner, given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association, and 2020 Best Podcast News Award winner, given out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. I also co-host and co-produce the only online show in the world for dads, fathers, and male caregivers. Being part of that team, we've reached out directly and indirectly to over 400,000 dads, fathers, and male caregivers around the world. So as always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. Well, one of my all-time favorite songs is by a gentleman named Kenny Loggins, and it's called This Is It. And it is, this is it. It's happening tonight. So unless you have your head in the sand, there is a pretty big event happening tonight. It's called the presidential debate between Kamala Harris and 45. And I think if you're here tonight and you're catching this live, I think you're catching something very unique, because we have a North American conversation, Canada-US conversation, live takes on tonight's debate. So before we go any further, I'm going to get people up one at a time. So I'll put that up there. Always will say, to advertise your business, product, or service on any of the platforms that I am on, please feel free to email me, dr.vibe at the drvibeshow.com. And that is one part. And I got one more thing I want to put up here. So I've got to find it. So just give me 1 second. I'm trying to find it. Here we go. Why can't I find it? I can't find it. Well, you know what? Oh, subscribe to the Dr. Vibe show. I don't need to have the lower third up. I've done it so many times. So subscribe to the Dr. Vibe show on YouTube and hit the notification button so you can get us more and more subscribers, and follow the Dr. Vibe show on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So let's get this here. So one by one, I'm going to bring up the guests. So we have the queens from the U.S., and we have the king. Well, right now, the king. We have more kings, some of the king from Canada, but as an old song by Queen Latifah says, we're going to do ladies first. So first up, from Connecticut, what is going on? Is going on? Say hello. Tell us who you is, because some people may not know.
I'm Aisha K. Staggers and co-host of Primetime Saturday with Aisha and Lala on the Dr. Vibe show. And this is my daughter,
Amaya.
It's Maya Kelly. Yep. She's Gen Z. That's why I asked her to come, because all of us are pretty much Gen X. So we needed some new blood to kind of, get the conversation started, see what young people are talking about and thinking. And it's also going to be her first election to vote in. So.
Wow. Okay. Next up, the real estate queen, international queen. What is going on?
Oh, I'm ready for this. I'm so ready for this. I'm still thinking to myself, is he really going to show up? Is he really going to stay on stage? We don't know.
Stop it. He's going to, I think he's going to show up.
Yeah.
Well, we know what he's going to say.
So,
he's going to show up and lie.
You do introduce yourself, because you better tell us who you is.
Oh, yes. I guess I should. I am the other half of Primetime Saturday with Aisha and Lala. I am Lala. I'm an international real estate agent, and I love having our show every Saturday, but this is going to be a woo for me. And actually, guys, this is my very first watch party.
There you go. All right. Fantastic. Yeah. Next up, the power behind Indie Soup Media from Fort Lauderdale. Always wearing the great lids and the hoop earrings, Dr. Tachi.
Sir, how are you? Madams, how are you?
How are you guys? She asked you.
I was muted. I'm great. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here. I'm really, really happy to be here. Thank you for having me and asking.
My pleasure. We're looking forward to it. And so far, the only king. So let's go north of the 49th. Ryan O'Neill Knight, my co-host of the Morning Vibe. What is up? You're on mute, my brother. Oh, I got it.
I was gonna say, let's get ready to rumble. So I am so excited for this, and I'm so glad you're able to pull together this amazing panel. I'm just honored to be part of it. I watched Primetime Saturday, and as Dr. Vibe mentioned, I am a co-host with him on the Morning Vibe on Mondays and Fridays at 9 a.m. Eastern. But I'm also the executive director of the Afro-Caribbean Business Network. So we support entrepreneurs of African and Caribbean heritage. And an entrepreneur myself, I run a social enterprise called Detailing Nights, providing mobile, waterless car cleaning. But today I am just Ryan Knight, here to give my thoughts and views. Watch Donald Trump stick and move. We'll see how he does as Kamala throws the kitchen sink at him. So yeah,
This is gonna be like Foreman and Ali, right?
Rumble in the jungle.
So
we wear out with those questionable truths, he'll call them questionable truths.
All right. And now I can put it up officially. Please subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and hit the notification button, and like the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So, folks, we got about 8 minutes. Thoughts, comments before we see this craziness. So for people who are watching, I'm going to put the abc.com feed on their YouTube in the main screen once the debate starts. So we've got about 6 minutes. Any thoughts before this happens?
Well, I can say that the expectations for Donald Trump are very low. You know, if he shows up and doesn't drool on himself, people will call that a win. And the expectations for Kamala Harris are super high. So if she doesn't, tell him I'm speaking, then, she'll lose, right? It's ridiculous.
I'm just ready because she's ready. Like, here's the thing. She knows her stuff. This is nothing new to her. She's an attorney. She's the vice president. And I'm going to continue to say that because people like to lessen the fact that she already holds a position of power. So she is our vice president. Let's not forget that. And so all of this boo-ha-ha of saying she's not ready, give me a break. She's already doing it. The vice president doesn't do as much as the president in public because they're there for a reason. So, but it doesn't mean she doesn't know what she's doing. And honestly, I don't think anybody, I don't care who you are, I don't think anybody is ready to be the president at all, because once you get up there, you think you are, but then when you get there, you find out that things are not exactly what you think they were. And sometimes you have to backtrack on some of the things that you promised, but you're not ready unless you've already served that. And we already see that Trump was not ready to serve that and was awful at serving that. So that's my point.
Right. I have to agree with Laura, Lala. And I also agree with Aisha in terms of what's been said, that who is really ready when it comes to that. I think that that women of color, particularly women, and then women of color, and then particularly Black women, are held to a higher standard when it comes to holding public office, regardless of any experience that they've had beforehand, because this was not the discourse when he was running for president and the first few times. And he had no experience except being on The Apprentice, and that does not qualify you to run a country. But this was not the discourse. It's the discourse now because she's a Black woman. So I'm interested and ready to see a good debate between people, or at least one person. That's all.
Boy. Well, I'm watching this to see, and I always love watching the Trump pundits, how they spin things. So can Trump create anything that sticks and creates reasonable doubt in people's mind about VP Harris? Because a lot of times, you come into these situations, and he's done it before. I mean, he railroaded his way into the nomination in 2016, and same thing this year. So him being able to create doubt in the minds of voters for his opponents, he is a master at this. And again, you might not like him, but his charisma to get people on board with his questionable truths is very efficient. So I'm curious to see what tactic his team has come up with for this debate to get something to stick, because the current attempts I don't think have been working. So I'm curious to see what they've come up with. And I'm sure he's going to come right out the gate with it. Some sort of nickname, some sort of policy that she has that he's just going to keep on her belt. So I'm curious what their attack plan is.
Well, you know, Black women already have a prayer warrior chain going. My mom just texted me a prayer for Kamala.
Yes. Oh, nice.
Listen.
Yes. Calling on the ancestors to manifest on this planet and in this land at this moment in time, be with this woman, Kamala Harris, one born of the melding of cultures, one steeped in a belief in humanity and dignity, one daring to lay bare her vulnerability to safeguard our democracy.
Wow.
And to your prayer warrior point, you know, this is what Black women do, right? Black women are prayer warriors. And
yes.
What is the saying? What is the scripture? If God be for ye, who be against ye?
Right.
And that honestly, I think faith will play a big role here. Not just faith in the individuals debating to lead or to debate well, but faith in terms of what people are bringing in terms of beliefs to this whole thing. It's playing a major role, and I think it's going to continue to play out. But she's covered.
Yeah.
If nothing else, she's covered.
And what we're going to see tonight is a debate between a human and a heathen.
Oh, geez.
That's all it is.
But his supporters do not believe that. When you talk about faith, they have put all their faith in this man as if he is some sort of God that can save them from the poverty of the Midwest. I don't know what it is exactly that they make the connection, but he's been able to create this following. And as much as you might not like what he says or like him as a person, he's figured out a way to create a following that got him elected and almost got him elected the second time, because more than ever, people were voting that year. I think they broke records on both sides. Luckily, Biden was able to push through, but he has a way to get followers. So I'm curious what messaging he has for his base to really get them amped up. Because remember, if they stay, I'll say complacent, then Kamala will railroad him. But if he can get them hyped, then she is going to have some trouble.
Okay, just going to interrupt for a quick second. Want to say comments here. Laura Lynn Joyce. Oh my goodness, Dr. Tachi. That's Birdie Lynn. What's going on? And number one supporter of Primetime Saturdays in the house, Jen Myers. So there we go. We're back. So I know there may be so many people that some people may get pushed out of the screen because of the configuration, but we'll be able to hear you via voice. We're down to less than 2 minutes before it starts. Any final comments with 2 minutes?
What does Gen Z have to say about tonight?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I feel like everybody like in my generation kind of knows that Kamala's gonna do a good job. I don't think like we don't have like very high expectations for Trump anyways, obviously. So I feel like we know that she's gonna do a good job and like stay on topic regardless of whatever he tries to talk about.
Well, he may pull something out. He's done it, but he's pulled some fires out of the hat before.
Yeah, but I mean, look, the only thing she has to do is ask him about childcare, because that answer that he gave last week, childcare is childcare. What was that? What was that? We know childcare is childcare. It's damn expensive.
One thing I think that he really, when we talk about it, like the attorney speak, right? The burden of proof lies on the prosecution, right? And he has a lot that, and if we look at his side as the prosecution, he has a lot that they have to really place the burden of proof on. He or the burden of proof is with them rather. He has not been doing a good job.
Okay, I think we are going to get ready to go. Let's see. So people are looking at, well, okay, we may have a few more seconds, but it looks like they're getting ready to make things happen. And Aisha's been good to tell me there are 2 commercial breaks.
Yes.
So
Right.
here, okay, let's see. They're panning away from the hosts. Let's see. Okay. We got darkness. Okay, well, I think we can keep on going. I don't think we want to hear the commentary. So we got a few more seconds. I guess they're waiting. I'm waiting for they started late. I'm waiting for somebody. They started late. Someone's going to say they started late.
Well, no, they started right on time. These are the moderators.
Yeah. So it's the other people. Yeah. Well, Lala, you still may get your wish. You still may get the
Even if he does show up, I say this. Let's go ahead and put him where he belongs, in jail, and put Kamala in office, and let's move forward to get this country back on track.
I hope he's got a fresh diaper on.
Okay, so you know what? I'm going to actually turn the volume on now.
Okay.
Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face, historic. The ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir and Lindsay Davis. Good evening.
Yep, I think we lost sound.
For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock. That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for 2 candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris. Let's have a good debate. Thank you.
Welcome to you both. It's wonderful to have you. It's an honor to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax $1,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. They would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation has, which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump, will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns. We got we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounce back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy. And the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
It's just a soundbite. I gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. And you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out. When a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. she's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
So the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's an execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years, they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions, very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government and Donald Trump certainly should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular, the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it
Well,
came
I
to
won't
your desk?
have to because, again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of when they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working one or two jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs, barely can afford to do it. And what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President.
Excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question. Would you veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first. And I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country. And it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, will end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
The people
I'm
on
taking it from
television
the city
saying
manager.
the dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. I think one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And This will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
excuse me, the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people
Vice President
to stop
Harris,
him.
Thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on longstanding work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down. And name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump,
well, first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment,
to.
as
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out of the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the president of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath. if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge it at all.
But
I said that sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No judge looked at it.
And said
they said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself. But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as vice president of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that, but he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think
up.
we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately. And the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel and an equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation. And now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
And she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way, gets paid a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
You should have said, why don't you go ask him? Like, Biden. This guy's talking about Biden 50% of the time.
Oh my God, the amount of times that he repeated himself is like, dude, if you're trying to convince people that you're not old, you're doing that. That's like, that's like sometimes, my grandfather's in his 80s, he's 89. And, sometimes he'll ask you a question and then a half hour later, he'll ask you the same question. And, that's what happens as people get older. Hell, there are times where, I walk into a room and I'd be like, what was I saying? Oh yeah, I forgot. Okay. And then start talking and like, wait, why did I come in here? Mm-hmm. So if I'm doing that at 50, imagine what he's doing at 79.
May I ask a question?
Hurry
Why are we here? Why is this even happening? I'm really like this is very disturbing that we've gotten to the point that a whole individual, if we can call him that, is allowed to be court jesterous on an international stage. This is real. Why are we here?
Yep.
Or to say that they're doing transgender operations on illegal immigrants in prison. But wait a second, you also said that illegal immigrants aren't in prison. So which is it, sir?
My biggest concern, can Mr. Trump answer the question?
No, he never can.
No. You didn't know?
He never can, and he's never answered a question. He always reflects back to him what he does. He reflects to lies. He always deflects. It's nothing but deflect, lie, repeat. That's it. That's it. He has no moral compass whatsoever, and he does not deserve to be on this stage at all. He needs to be in jail, exactly where his ass belongs.
He basically said women are killing their babies after they're born.
Yeah, okay.
That
and
was
what
the quote of the
What's
century.
he smoking?
Let me just
I know you have something to say.
Up his base. He came on to yell and get his base hype. But Caesar, good to see you, brother.
Good to see you, family. Dr. Tashi.
Hey.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Sorry for that. No, but basically, I think the really worrisome part is, I think someone was saying, how come this race is even close? When you see it there, when you see this debate, you got to ask yourself, how come there are millions of people, and not just in the US, but right here in Canada, who actually support this man? It's so blatantly obvious. It makes you wonder about society. Is it, me, I often talk about the dumbing down of America, and I don't blame the Simpsons per se, but you got to wonder, are all those dumbing down shows have really had an effect at this age, at this time, upon millions and millions of people, that they look at someone like Trump and they say, I would vote for basically Bart Simpson, Homer Simpson, because this is really what it is. This is Lisa Simpson versus Homer Simpson.
Yeah, but the thing of it is that he hates the people that they hate. They would rather sacrifice themselves, their livelihoods, if it meant that people of color, LGBTQ people, immigrants were getting something that they can get. That's all it is. It's like they don't want people to be on the same playing field. It's like when you're at the bottom of the barrel, you want the people who are further at the bottom to stay below you so that you can say that you're above something or someone. And that's all there is. He's got, you know who supports him? The people who have the least amount of white power in this country. Those are the people that support him. And the only thing that they have is that they're white.
And allow me to add very quickly, because notably for you, my sisters, sisters in the US,
go ahead.
A lot of misogyny, including also in our Black community. I confront every week Black men, not the majority, but there are Black men who you come to realize it's not only they can't fathom a woman being on top of them, they can't fathom a Black woman being on top of them. And of course, not only
coming back.
Yes.
Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more. because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's. Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they
here,
threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war? Yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin? And would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to define one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strong men instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander-in-chief. And the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this. And the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that we began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park Five, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Time's up.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country. One who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President Trump, we have to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy, please.
To defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President
She
Trump,
has
we do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's what her plan is until just recently.
I just need to
Lindsay,
respond.
President Trump,
No, the
President
former
Trump.
president has said
No, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry.
I
We're
just
gonna
need to
move
respond
on, Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this is
multiple
now
times.
your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan? And can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be? Never going to be great. Or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time. When I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate, and the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the time, because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it.
Vice President Harris,
in terms of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
of... made a mistake. And number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or is being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
It didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Go ahead, anyone?
Okay, so quick fact check. The Central Park jogger is still alive. Can we just say that?
He's mental, period.
He didn't die. I mean, good Lord.
This is a hot mess. I mean, but we knew that it was going to be a hot mess. But let me say this about ABC. ABC needs to do better about what they're doing when he is not supposed to be speaking or when she is not supposed to be speaking. I don't care what side. Your rules say turn off the mic. Do not continue to let him or her, if they cross the line, be continuing to talk. You can't do that. I'm tired of this media giving legs up to him because it's always in his freaking favor.
And they're giving him more than the 1 minute to rebut that they're supposed to allow. He's gone on for like 2 and 3 minutes on some of these tangents that he's been going on.
He needs the time. He needs that time. No, but if I'm not mistaken, I did read somewhere that if there was significant conversation that was going on, they would reopen the mics, unless I missed that. But I did read that was something that they were going to allow.
But he wasn't getting significant conversation.
No, he wasn't.
Anything that's coming out of his mouth is theater. And so if they feel it's going to be something that can become a soundbite, they will let him talk.
Listen, let's thank you for saying this. Let's be clear. I think everybody here is, yes, media is supposed to be here for the education of the people, for the service of the people. However, we also know that media exists because of advertising. So as we keep saying, if it bleeds, it leads. Whoever can get the most fantastic sound bites, who can get to it first, they're the ones who are going to get the advertising dollars. Now, I'm not accusing ABC of anything when it comes to this. Is just the way media works. And so I think it's become almost an accepted thing. And so everybody who's leveling these allegations, you're absolutely right. It should not be happening. But again, advertising, they're not going to let go of this opportunity. They have the sole rights to this, basically. They're not going to let go of this opportunity to monetize this.
Gen Z is sitting here confused. She doesn't know what she just saw.
Because there's no plan. Like, they asked him multiple times, like, oh, what's your plan for X, Y, and Z? And then he always keeps talking about China. And I'm just like, why? like
no,
what are you going to do?
He has a plan. His plan is to get elected so that he can avoid jail time. That is the plan.
Exactly. That's the plan.
Exactly.
That's the plan.
Exactly.
because jail is imminent, whether it's these 34 counts or somewhere else. Jack Smith redoing his indictment, that right there is going to lead to jail time.
We have to remember there's enough people that believe conspiracy theories to elect this man. And
exactly.
He came in hot. He started out, I would say, tried to do his advisor, whatever they told him to do, and it lasted 5 minutes. And then he went hot. He went from like a 4 to a 10.
When she laughed at him.
His people.
When she laughed at him. And here we are in the land of tinfoil hats.
Yeah.
There's enough of them. So that's the sad part.
Of course, that's why everything is so close. I have always said, and I still stick by my guns, that you're never going to change the minds of true orange drinking Trumpsters. You're just not going to change them. So no matter what you say, they're always going to disagree with you, and they're always going to defer to what he's saying and believe his lies. That is very frightening for our country. This is why it's so close, because he's brought all the kooks out of the closet.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's frightening about this country as well is the fact that this didn't just start with people who were able to vote. This started with a lack of critical thinking education in the classroom, so you can discern what is straight lie and what is actually the truth. It started with
okay, we're back.
Constitution Center in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here again, David Muir and Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that. And within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question.
Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughing. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
I'm just watching to see. They're not going to shake hands. Okay. All right.
Gotcha.
He freaked out because she walked up shaking his hand the first way. He didn't want to shake her hand. Did y'all see his body language?
He was like, "Go, she's right
came
here."
straight for him with the hand out. He didn't even know what to do with himself. He had no choice but to shake her hand, but he did not want to touch her.
Can I say real quick that
hopefully he goes to bleach his hand. Remember?
Not wanting to touch her.
No, but he had a chance to really pin her on her policies, and he totally let it slip. And I'm thinking of how the Trump pundits are going to try and spin this, but he spent too much time on conspiracy theories. And I know, Wayne Harris, you're saying in the comments, yeah, he's selling the emotion. But at a certain point, when people are upset, they want to know what the solution is. And I feel in 2016, he did a way better job of selling a vision of how he was going to fix the reason people were mad. Now he's just getting people mad for no reason, and they're like lost, because when you ask them, oh, why are you mad, and what is Trump going to do for you? They can't answer it. So he's leaving people really lost, and I feel sorry for the pundits that have to go, that are doing their reviews right now and that are going to be on the news circuit tomorrow trying to defend this performance, which it wasn't even off the rails at some points. When you started talking about people eating the cats and dogs, I was wondering, what gumball cartoon am I watching right now?
Well, you said the thing about him selling emotion and what was different in 2016 versus afterwards. Well, the thing that was different in 2016 was that he didn't have a 4-year record of having been in power, that people can say, wait a second, we remember this. Don't try and make us. It's like he tried to whitewash, or, it's kind of like Men in Black when they hold up the pen and say, forget the last 4 years. My 4 years. Yeah. That's what he's trying to do with people. And that is why his people have bought it. It's kind of like a brainwashing that he does at his rallies. And there are triggers, there are words that make them forget the hardship that they suffered, make them forget the pandemic, the shutdowns, all of that, and just focus in on the things he wants them to focus on.
Okay, so
you don't have to convince crazy. Crazy's always going to believe crazy.
Go ahead, Wayne.
So again, apologies for being late. I told Dr. Vibe that I was 2 other events before I got to this one, but you guys did a great job of looking at the chat. It was just fire, just watching what was coming through. Who thought Kamala won the debate? If you raise your hand, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
3.
I would say so, and I wasn't expecting to. I thought he didn't come with any plan. And sorry, I'll let you finish.
Debates are not about plans. Debates are about not even explaining your position. The debate is to poke holes into the other person's position. So the question, the question really becomes, if you look at the art and science of debate, did her facts, from her perspective, her truths, outweigh his truths to those people who are in the gray area? So those who are going to vote red are going to vote red, regardless of whether he's there or he's not. Those who are going to vote blue are going to vote blue, whether she's there or not. It's the undecided middle, the purples, so to speak, the people on the left who are close to center, and the people who are on the right who are close to center. Did either one of those sides get swayed by what you saw here tonight? And we're going to know very soon. That's all I was looking for, is did he say anything that would get someone who is blue or purple to go red? Did she say anything?
I think so few of those people exist, really. Honestly, people who are saying that they're undecided, people that they've been polling who are undecided, 99% of them are lying. Let's be very clear. We've lived in this country where both he and her have existed in public office for the last 8 years, okay? So they're lying if they say they're undecided. That's point blank, period. There are, what I think you get when you see these polls and these panels of people who are undecided, you find out afterwards that the people already are in the hole for somebody. Like one guy that they have on the biracial panel of undecideds, he's running for Congress as a Republican. It comes out afterwards. So people are being very disingenuous when they say that they're undecided, I think. And I think that we put too much emphasis on those people. This is going to be a matter of addition and subtraction. Kamala Harris needs to make sure that her people get out and get past the obstructions that are going to be in the way. And he has to make sure, and she also can add to her base. He has to make sure that the base that he has gets out, because he's not adding any other people. She's been adding and subtracting from that Republican base, especially those mainstream Republicans. He's not adding anything. So all he can depend on is that 75 million people that came out before, and he's pretty much probably lost about 12 million of them already. Let's be honest.
Do you believe that? I'm with you on the fact, because I remember in 2016, and also for both Obama elections, that people said one thing to the media and said one thing to the polls and then did another. And there was a group of, I think the demographics were white women and white men who said they were going to go blue, and they all went red. Okay, and everyone was shocked. I think that nothing's going to change for this election in the fall. The key here is, do the Democrats have, they pull out the vote and the middle, the black vote, and they go get people registered, and they do all that stuff, and they rally the troops, and they usually win when they do all that. And then they forget about the people who got them there for 4 years, and they come back and ask again. So are there enough people, and the Americans, please help me out, are there enough people in America who have seen this okie doke before that will fall for it again? And is that okie doke a real thing? Because from the outside looking in, it seems that the black vote is dependent upon, and you're not black if you don't vote for me, and all that stuff with Charlemagne the God, and then 3.5 years of policy. For those who are black and blue in the United States, did they do anything for you other than give you Juneteenth in the last 3.5 years?
Yeah,
so
a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. See, the thing is, I think we have to remember that this is not just a country of blacks. And so what happens is you work on enacting policies that help large groups of people that will then, by default, also help Black people. We have to remember where we are as well. It is not so cut and dry, and it is not so simple, in my opinion, and from what we've seen. It's very complex, and I don't think that to hold anyone to task when this country has been in existence with the same institutionalized policies for 200 plus years and expect somebody in even 8 years to fix it, I don't care who it is, it's almost impossible. So we're up against a lot. And here's the thing. Yes, I do think that there is a lot of kowtowing to Black communities, also to communities of color when it comes to wanting the vote, definitely. And then maybe some of the things are not fulfilled, but it's not just on elected officials. What are you as an individual, as a citizen doing? Because it's on us too. So we're so big about talking, oh, well, they didn't do. What the hell did you do? Are you
Right.
out there doing stuff?
Right.
Are you
Right.
out there doing voter registration drives? Are you helping to clean up the community, or are you sitting back and waiting for somebody else to do it? It is a collaborative effort. It is not just on elected officials. And you also, when you are doing your part, then you are well within your rights to hold them accountable. Are you going to the school board meetings? Are you going to the city council meetings? Or are you expecting somebody else to do it? So if you're not doing your job as a citizen, then please miss me with that.
Okay, perfect.
But
So
one more thing, though, real quick, because Dr. Tachi, you just brought up a very good point. And I think that's the misunderstanding that people in our country have and people outside of our country have, is that the presidential election, it matters, but those down ballot races are so critical. People who didn't show up in 2022 because it was a midterm election, that's what flipped the House red. And that is, and remember, the president, first of all, we know what the vice president does, but they are responsible to the president. The president can only do what Congress signs and agrees to and hands to him or her. And let's be very clear about the things for Black people. Joe Biden, there are over 100 executive orders that are specific to Black people. If you read them, the problem is that most people, Joe Biden, they don't do a good job at promoting them, but most people also don't do their own research and go check the government website and say, hey, what executive orders did he sign this year? Let me see what he did, et cetera, et cetera. But then the other question becomes, well, what the hell did Trump do for Black people aside from sign the stimmy check that Nancy Pelosi got for you in the first place?
Right. So to my point, it's not really my point, it's really Dr. Claude Anderson's Empowernomics point, where he talks about you have to take care of the economic base. I think Ta-Nehisi Coates also said it, that going down the political path versus the economic path was kind of the miss during the whole civil rights movement, that if we focus on controlling who the sheriff was, who the DA was, who the city councilors were, by having the economic footprint in their writings where they would have to create policies to take care of us at the grassroots. It's almost, I'm not saying the rest is going to take care of itself, but because that foundation is there, because we have a sheriff that's going to put in policies that are not going to police us in a way that are going to be counterintuitive to our best interests. Once you build that up, you start building a base. Now, for those
remember,
of us,
we tried that. They burned those towns down.
oh yeah, Black Wall Street.
That's the other part, is that we have to remember the other side of it, is that when it did happen, what they do? They burned the towns down or they destroyed them. Like you look at Mound Bayou, Mississippi, that was the only thriving Black community in the state of Mississippi, had the only Black swimming pool. What did they do? They built up everything around it after they ended segregation. And so the people ended up leaving, and the town is pretty much barren now. And we know what happened with Rosewood and Tulsa and all that other stuff. So
So again, I want to focus on the last. The Civil Rights Act came into being 1 year before I was born.
Is next.
Yeah, so I'm thinking about in the last 60 years, not 100 years ago. Important, relevant, yes, but I'm thinking about what's going on. Honestly, not even the last 60, in the last 30 years, where you can see those economic bases being created. The modern day Black Wall Street and where they are. I know Atlanta is a great example of that, but where else are there opportunities like that in the United States for Blacks? I know you guys have opportunity zones and different things like that, and depending on who you talk to, you have to know what those things will do for and against you. But listening to these guys tonight, getting back to the debate, I think that there's a large portion of people in the United States that believe tonight's debate matters more to them than it actually does. And that's the scary part of this whole thing. There's people who believe that Kamala, if she did a great job, or Trump did a great job, that somehow, Reaganomics is going to trickle down to their lives and make their lives better. And it's not, because last I checked, a lot of the stuff that these guys are talking about are controlled at the state level, right? Including now Roe v. Wade, right? So the state and what goes on in your individual state is paramount to your ability to improve your life, not the presidency. And I think this is something that I don't know who's going to say it to the people, but it needs to be said.
Cesar, okay, I got it. Cesar.
Thank you. And great questions, Brother Wayne. But I have to jump in from a Pan-Africanist lens, but also from the 20-something-year-old, late 20s that I was, who was part of the international volunteers for the Obama campaign in 2008. And I gave you the example of right here, Ottawa, capital of Canada, so many Black people in support of Obama. And you know what? When came the time to be on action mode, go to the States, volunteer for a weekend, we were only 2 Black people among so many white people. We were only 2 Black people, me and Rochelle DeCoste, a community leader here. Only 2 Blacks. When Dr. Vibe knows him, I mean, all the people in Canada know him, the current Prime Minister of Ontario came to Ottawa before he was elected, Doug Ford. I was the only Black community leader who went to meet him, challenge him, question him regarding the Black community. So your questions are absolutely valid, but this is where, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use that term, the miseducation of the Negro comes into play. Because in order to continue to oppress us, it is purposefully wanted to keep our Black people disinterested in things that truly matter to them. You gave a very good point in terms of, yes, presidential elections, but the real difference in most people's daily lives is who's the mayor, who is the city councilor, the area where you live in, the neighborhood, the garbage pickup. I often remind people, I live in a nice street, it's clean. But why is it that it's clean here, but you can drive 10, 15 minutes down the road and the garbage is still there? But at the same time, if you don't have an educated minority in the Pan-Africanist sense, what the Black Panthers were doing, which the Republicans killed with Reagan, what Thomas Sankara was doing, talking about even the soldier has to be educated. And France, the country of freedom and democracy, they killed him. Too many of our people, and I say it, I repeat it all the time, the 3 cancers of the Black psyche: entertainment, consumerism, and religion. What it does is that it makes us suitable to be dominated and to be oppressed. It is so unfortunate because effectively, you see, remember, why is it that we know so well we have the same community that will rightfully complain of racism, rightfully complain regarding politics, rightfully complains about economics, rightfully complains about, let's say, appropriation of culture and anything you want. But if on that same night you have an NBA game or a football game, you lost most of our people. If Beyonce is performing, or Rihanna, we lost. Like, I hate to say this, but I can say it because we're all Black here on the screen. But imagine how then we are perceived because truly, when those walking back, Kamala Harris made reference to that. The tiki torches, Charlottesville, when they're walking, you will not replace us. The biggest fear of white supremacy has always and is still, as you see behind me, great Black leaders. And unfortunately, I don't have such a painting for great Black female leaders. The greatest fear of white supremacy has always been a woke Black person. Because a woke Black person is a political Black person, is a Black person who will make economic choices, is a Black person who will make cultural, linguistic, etc., choices. And that scares the shit out of white supremacy, which as Sister Aisha was saying, this is how we had Black Wall Street. This is how we had, right after the Civil War in the States. My wife is African American. This is where you had African Americans who were thriving and successful, and as such, the poor whites, notably of Scottish background, that's why they created the KKK, because they couldn't handle the fact that these slaves and word that they were looking down upon were able to come together, organize themselves, and rise up. So that miseducation, it's up to each and every one of us, because each time we have one Black person, man or woman, becoming Black conscious, Pan-Africanist, becoming woke, it's not an insult. It's the white racists will use that as an insult. When Marcus Garvey was saying about being woke 100 years ago, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, being awake, being aware. Every time a Black man and a Black woman become so, we are saving one Black family. We have a lot of Black families to save. A lot of them.
All right.
I want to make sure.
Hold on. Lala, did you want to say anything?
I don't even know how to even add anything other than that. That was so very eloquent and so on point and so valid and so well spoken that all I can say is y'all need to pay attention to what he said, because it's important for us to understand every word that came out of his mouth. You can't sit back on your laurels and say you didn't, and don't get up off of your butt and do it yourself. You must be active in our process.
Okay.
Yeah. And Ryan, everybody has something to offer. Everybody has different gifts.
Hold on, Ryan's next. Ryan.
Yeah, it's all good. But one thing that we have to remember is these debates is, I guess, determined by what is sticky. And remember, she did not say anything specifically about Black people. So it's great that we have that sentiment. But sticky things that she did mention that perked my ear up is the $50,000 tax benefit for small business. And she had a really good answer about the conflict in Israel. But one thing that Trump mentioned that stuck with me is the fact that he had implemented tariffs before and they stayed after he came out of office. But I was curious, Amaya, what was sticky for you? Like, what do you remember after all of this has been now completed and we're talking, but what stands out for you?
Well, one thing that did actually stand out to me was ending statements, and how just like the contrast in like the views that Kamala has for America versus what Trump has for America. Like Kamala spoke of optimism, she spoke about hope, and for people my age, a lot of us are hopeless. Like a lot of us are very just have this sort of dreary sort of idea of what our future is going to be. And she helped to, make us feel good, make us feel like, okay, things are going to get better. All Trump did was talk about how bad like the country is, how bad of a state we're like of a state of the country is in. And that just like didn't make me feel good. That just kind of made me feel like, wow, that entire party is just focused on negativity. It's just focused on hate. And it's like, it really does feel like they're trying to like bring us back to that dark place that the country once was. And that, now she's focused on bringing us forward, bringing us into a new sort of era of our country where everybody can succeed. And, I think that is going to sort of, I think that's going to like help her a lot.
I want to just give you a piece of advice that I got from Biggie Smalls when you said that what Trump said about you. Shit's depressing. Please forget it.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Dr. Tachi.
I wanted to ask Amaya a question too, because it's invaluable that we have a member of Gen Z on the panel. What role do you think that the use of social media has in terms of people accepting one, Gen Z, for example, accepting one candidate or another? We know that the Harris campaign has been on it when it comes to social media, not necessarily so much with the Trump campaign. So for you as a Gen Z, what are you seeing and hearing from other Gen Z people? Is social media effective?
I think it definitely is, because that's all my generation kind of knows. It's all we've been exposed to. I will say, however, for like me personally, I've started to kind of like pull away from some social media, just because like so much of it can be like a detriment. Like you can see like even on like X, like the way Elon Musk is now like completely changed his platform. It's like now conspiracy theories are like completely taking over, like, and no one's really challenging it. And like to like a point that was mentioned earlier, a lot of that has to do with miseducation and people not like taking the time to actually do their own research. They say they do it, but they really don't. They just listen to other people who've already done the work for them, and they don't like go back and say, oh, like, let me fact check that. Let me see if that's actually true. Like that was literally what I was doing, like when the debate first started, and he was like talking about abortion in West Virginia and how like it's legal after 9 months. And I literally just did a quick Google search. I just said abortion in West Virginia and it's completely banned. Like there's no exceptions. And so I know that for like people in my generation, social media does help with that, because it does offer people the opportunity to like fact check and say like, hey, that's not actually true. This is what the truth is. It's just sad that a lot of people have now sort of used it as a way to make it a complete echo chamber, and no one's actually sort of using it for good, using it the way that it should be if we want to get people engaged and and get people out to vote.
Yeah. And her perspective is also a bit different too, being Gen Z, because she's been interested in politics since she was like 2.5. She's been watching C-SPAN and MSNBC since she was little and knew what was going on. So, I think it also too is earlier we get our young people engaged, the more active they're going to be in politics, because we don't have civics education in the US anymore.
Yeah.
They said that they were folding that into, it used to be a separate class. My mother was in high school, it was a separate class you took. And in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, they folded that into US history. And now it's reduced to a paragraph in a textbook.
And like for me, I didn't actually, my earliest like exposure to like actual like full on civics was I had to take an AP government class when I was a sophomore in high school. And that was my only sort of exposure I had to civics. Other than that, it really was sort of like my mom said, like roped into US history, but you didn't actually get to like fully understand like how laws work, how laws are made, like the entire structure of our US government. And I think that's really important for a lot of people to like learn, because like I'll like look on like social media and a lot of people my age talk about like, oh, why didn't Biden do this? Like he can just sign an executive order. And like I literally want to go like, that's not how that works. It's like not only is that not how it works, but it's like executive orders do not last, because once a new president comes in, they can just immediately write it off and then sign it. That's why the importance of like actually making laws that like will stay laws is important. But a lot of people don't know that because there's no education about it.
I want to ask everyone here, I'm going to do a roundtable thing. On a scale of 0 to 10, 45's performance. Without bias.
If his objective was to yell as loud as he can, he gets a 10. If his objective was to poke holes, like Wayne was saying, in VP Harris's campaign, it was a 2. He didn't get his base, I don't think, to understand why her policies are bad. He just went sideways for me.
Anybody else?
I agree with Ryan, actually, because on like as for the number 2, because you're right, he didn't poke holes, but he also didn't. He lied. That's I think that's the other point we have to make. He lied for 90 minutes.
Where was anyone surprised that ABC fact checked in real time?
I was very surprised.
Yeah.
When they did
I was happily surprised.
Yeah, is this a thing? Are they doing this?
You know what, though? I think there was a lot at stake there. If they did not do that, we would have heard it all about it tomorrow morning and beyond. So I think it was within their best interest to go ahead and do that, the live fact checking, even though it was light. It was within their best interest to do it for the good of the station.
I would also add that if we are truly honest, CNN did not do Joe Biden a favor in that last debate. So ABC, and to be quite honest, even before that, when Trump had a town hall with I can't remember her name.
Kate Collins.
Anyways, yes, Kate Collins. Exactly. So Trump, when you're asking about his performance, I'll be honest, he did 10 on 10.
Yeah.
He did 10 on 10 for his MAGA people. Because as Wayne was saying, we are listening to someone as Kamala Harris expecting rationality. And even when she gets emotional, we expect coherence. We expect facts. We expect that she makes sense. She doesn't have that room where we are just going to swallow her lie and applaud to it.
Anything
We
she
will hold her
says.
accountable.
Right.
Trump functions by a different set of rules, truthfully, for decades. I mean, I always say it, isn't it amazing that you have people in the US Army, and we know how the Army in the US is such an institution, but you have people who have been military and who are veterans who are rationalizing, basically doing mental gymnastics to support someone who is a draft dodger. That should be a red line right there. In the same sense as white evangelicals in the US claiming to be about the Bible and yet going to vote for a man who cheated on all his wives, including sleeping with a porn star while his wife is pregnant. It's mental gymnastics to keep supporting. So for his base, for his MAGA people, for those type of people, including here in Canada, including who are black, who are Arabs, who are indigenous and Asians will support him. He did great because he did as they expect him, as they've come to support him. The lies don't bother them. The racism and sexism don't bother them. The potential of being a dictator doesn't bother them. None of that bothers them.
Right.
So then let me ask then, what did you think of Ms. Harris's performance?
I think it was excellent. She was on point. She, like we expected her to be. But then again, look at what you just said. We know Trump's going to be off the rail, but we expect her to be so much better than what he is. So she fulfilled those shoes largely. She hit some very key points that she knew that he was not going to be able to stay on point from, and she brought some very key truths that, let's not forget, he has been, and he's a felon. So he's still getting special treatment from that. But let's not forget that he is what he is. He's always told us and showed us what he is. And she made it a point to show it once again as well. I think she did very well. I think she kept on point. And when she needed to raise her voice to the level that she needed to raise it, she did so. And she did it well.
It was. Go ahead, Aisha.
I think the other thing that we really have to think that's different this time versus the last time Trump ran for president against Joe Biden. This Dobbs thing, I know that there are 4 of us here that are women. This Dobbs thing is just, I can't describe to you how it's not just affecting Democratic women. It really is about healthcare. Like if I lived in South Carolina and I had a fibroid burst, like I haven't happened, they would not treat me. I would bleed out. And I have a very serious blood disorder. So there's no way of fixing that except for doing a DNC, which is the same procedure that they use for abortions. The procedures are the same for any kind of treatment for women's gynecological issues, whether it's a pregnancy or not. And by making those things illegal, women are dying, women are getting sick, women are losing their fertility behind this. And it's not just Democratic women, it's largely Republican women, because they are largely in those red states and they are not liking this. And I think that we can't dismiss how much that is going to play an impact. Like Nikki Haley, and you people know how I feel about her. Nikki Haley was on the news this morning and yesterday saying that Donald Trump is going to lose women because of the way that he talks about them. And he also admitted he doesn't talk to his vice presidential candidate. You don't talk to him enough to say shut up about women, because he's also not doing him any favors. And the other thing too, Nikki Haley said this, is that when Trump starts to insult Kamala Harris, Republican women get their backs up. There were a few times in this debate that he was very dismissive of her. Like when he did the thing, he thought he was trying to be cute by saying, I'm talking. You remember that? And she didn't warrant it. It was really like, whoa, where'd that come from? You know, and he said it in a very nasty way. When she said it, it wasn't nasty. It was school teacher like. When he said it, it was, I'm being a nasty prick right now, just because I can. And yeah.
I just want to invite you into my mind, and I'm curious if anybody else felt this way. Watching in real time a Black woman have to be perfect. And same like happened with Obama. You know, like everything that he did, he had to be stellar just to get the respect. And then Trump waltzes in and is a complete mess and is able to waltz into the White House. And now we're watching again a Black person have to be perfect. And I felt like she was Simone Biles today. She stuck the landing and definitely hit a 10 out of 10. But it took that for now. I hope her whoever's gonna try to attack her, it's gonna be so difficult because she stuck that landing and like delivered on every point. And I'm watching her so intently that I felt like, why am I watching this woman so hard? Like, why does she have to be so perfect in this moment? And I can only imagine the stress that she's put under. And I felt she did excellent, but I'm hoping that she can keep this up because I can only imagine how this is weighing on.
You know, and this is an excellent point, because this is actually a microcosm of what we all experience in society every day. We can't afford to let guard down or not be excellent. Yet there are some people, some non-melanated people who are subpar, as we saw today, who are sub-mediocre, who are allowed to be sub-mediocre. And honestly, if I was non-melanated, I would be livid that all you expect from me is that is the best I can do. Because what we're hearing today is like, well, that's what we expect from him. So there were like low to no expectations of his performance. Not that he cares about this, but that is actually something that could be blanketed over lots of non-melanated people. The fact that you can just walk in and just be, and you are congratulated and celebrate, oh, you did great. You did not do great. Yeah. But yet when it's us, we have to be 10 million times as excellent. And we're watching the mix. Okay, now don't let us down, because the fate of the world and all Black people and Harriet Tubman is watching. The ancestors are watching you. We have to be perfect every single time. Now, it's not going to change because of this debate. That will continue to be a thing, but it's an interesting thing to watch. And it plays out in, if nothing else, this shows people, do you see how perfect we have to be? And how some people are allowed to just be anyhow.
Cesar.
But that goes back to the first thing I said, though, when we opened this conversation. All Trump has to do to pass the bar is not drool on himself.
Yeah.
It looked like he was trying to keep awake at the beginning. I don't know if that was
just me. Today, I was out of town and I was training I was given training in this agency. My first training at 9 a.m. was to the management team, the senior leadership team on microaggression. And you know what happened in my introduction? I told them, tonight there is a woman who will be victim of microaggression and likely of racism and sexism. And they all knew who I was talking about. And this was all white women, one Asian, and one white man. But they all knew I was talking about Kamala Harris. They didn't question because she's mixed or light skin, dark skin. No, no. They knew Kamala Harris, a black woman. I think it's a great thing, to be quite honest with you. When I say a great thing, we should never look in terms of being mediocre. But Trump, if there's one thing that I'm so thankful about Trump, one thing is that Trump has been arguably one of the best tools to expose so many of the conversations that we talk about white privilege, about systemic racism, about the very fact that this man, let's put it in perspective, my friends. Can you imagine this black man who has cheated on all his wives? First of all, this black man who has multiple wives, multiple kids by multiple wives, he cheated on them, porn star, fraud, bankruptcies, and he could be the ticket of a party.
Right.
You can't imagine that. This is the same America, but really the same world in which, and I'm not a fan of her. I'm not a fan of Hillary Clinton, but I truly say it. She was the best candidate for that position in 2016. And yet, because she was a woman, even among white women, majority of white women voted for Trump. So it tells you how little someone as Trump had to do. Even though I'm not a fan, and I mean, I'm too young, but I was a kid in the 80s, I can't help but, again, what would Ronald Reagan think of Republicans right now? Not his kids, Ronald Reagan of the 80s. What would he think of the Republicans right now? Because what we end up seeing when we have someone like Dick Cheney, aka borderline the Antichrist, 20 years ago, when we have Dick Cheney clearly saying that Trump being reelected is the biggest threat to America, when we have George Bush, the last Republican president, claiming that he's not taking any side, aka he's not voting for Trump, it tells you volume. So when we have Kamala, rightfully said by Dr. Tachi, it's not so much that the ancestors and the whole black community and the whole world is like hoping she doesn't fail. She has no choice but not to fail, because any failure would not have allowed her to be where she's at. When any of us on the screen here, professionals as we are, from Dr. Vibe to Ryan to Dr. Tachi, any of us on the screen right now, including those commenting, as notably I have one of my mentees, Kiana Mahmood here, a future doctor, Dr. Mahmood at the end of the year. We, because of the color of our skin, in order to succeed, are not allowed to have that misstep on the stairs of success, because that little misstep that can even be a traffic ticket can come back to haunt us in painting us in such a negative portrayal. Dr. Vibe, remember on Sunday when I was talking about the 14-year-old black youth who got killed, and yet a news media painted him as being the killer? We can't imagine such a, in the Georgia school shooting, we can't imagine such a thing of accidental identity upon a white child. We can't imagine a Kamala Harris or a Barack Obama presidential candidate saying lies after lies and having such messy private lives, fraud, bankruptcies. And the majority of black people wouldn't even vote for them.
You're on mute for a bit. Okay. Well, did she hold her ground tonight?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But again, I think it feels like none of us are really surprised because of everything we just said. Of course she would. Of course she had no choice but to hold her ground.
She had some
did it well.
In the first part of it, she had some serious knockout punches. Like he had 45, in my opinion, on the ropes a little bit.
He came off the rails in 5 minutes. She lit him up.
Any coaching that he had was out the window after two. And once he's off the rails, you can never reel him back in. I mean, literally talking about people eating dogs. Come on, y'all. We really went there.
That was
We really went there.
I know.
That was
I want to see how they defend this. I have to tune into Fox and just hear how they defend his performance.
Well, he's been writing a little bit there, y'all. But I mean, Fox has actually been, I mean, I know he has his die-hard people on Fox, but Fox has actually been kind of beating him up as well. Like because several people have called him out over his ishnit, and they will not let him die. And one anchor actually said to him when he came on, like, "We're tired of you. We're tired of you lying. We're tired of you lying. We keep trying to protect you, but all you do is lie." So this is his favorite network.
This might be that last straw kind of thing where it's like, what can we do with this? Like, no spin available. Sorry.
So let me ask, because I don't want to keep anyone up any longer, because we all have long days and we all in different areas, and some are up rather late. So Aisha, final comments.
Stay tuned, because the real thing here is how the media tries to sane wash what we just saw Trump do. Okay, so we know that's going to be the part. Stay tuned, because there's going to be some kind of spin. Okay, and we just got to be ready to combat it.
I'm going to also ask, and each one of you too, do we see another debate?
I don't think he wants to take her on again. No.
Okay, Ryan, final thoughts.
Same as Aisha. I'm very curious to hear how their pundits spin this, and it will either be a masterclass in whatever they come up with to save face, or they're gonna throw up their hands and be like, whatever we got, because this is our guy and we can't turn back. But I think he missed a good opportunity to stick at her policies and show what his plan is. He chose to sell the angry Republican emotion, and I think it fell on flat ears. She said, she put it well, where it's like, and she could have said, "We're done with you." Like this whole act, we're past that. She said it like, "We're not going back," but I think people are getting tired of the act. But his base is his base, so we'll see if he has enough to pull it off.
Dr. Tachi.
Well, they know not to ask me to run for anything, because the moment he started talking, I would be like, and scene, because it was a complete and total act. This is what, but we're not surprised, because this is what he knows. He knows television, he knows theater, he knows acting, and that's what he does. So the fact that he's made it this far is really not incredible in this country, but it's incredible. What I'm waiting to see, just like Aisha and also Ryan said, I 100% agree, but I'm wondering how much of an effect this will have on the vice presidential debates, and how they're able to pull this in and maybe make up for some of the crazy on his end, if they're going to coach J.D. Vance to really pick up the slack for where he seriously slacked.
Lala.
He ain't coachable. Vance is not coachable. He's just as off the rails as Trump. So he got a perfect running mate. My thing is this: it doesn't matter what we feel about this debate. It doesn't matter at all. It's entertainment. It is, it is what it is. It's a magic show. So what really matters to me is that you get yourself registered and you get yourself to the polls. I cannot stress that enough. And I'm not talking about just voting for the big ticket people. You need to be paying attention to who's voting in the down ballot, because see, all the crazies are also running underneath those ballots as well. Moms for Liberty, all those people are getting into these smaller positions to position themselves in a position of power to even go up further. And your children are at stake. We are at stake. Listen, the president is going to be the president. I told you, somebody going to get in there. They're going to promise the world. They're going to get in the White House, and somebody going to come in with the book and go, "Madam President, all those things that you said you was going to do. Here's the book. Can't do it. Okay. And here's why." Okay, fine. But we still need to pay attention to what we do in our communities. Make sure you vote, and don't just assume that you are registered, because I know shenanigans are going on, because it's happened in my family. My husband and I check to see about our voting records. We vote in everything. I'm registered. He's not. So you need to check every week to make sure that you are on those rolls. I can't stress this enough.
Yeah. Cesar.
How to put it? So, first of all, as one who has done a lot of debates, Donald Trump had the advantage at the end. They said he was the pick of the whatever the dice or, some pick. So he got to give the last word, and he stayed Donald Trump with grievances and anger and all that. And that's what people will remember. So yes, for his base. So did he fail? I think it's kind of as MAGA after Trump is dead, the movement to continue. They tried that before with the Tea Party, etc., etc. The other thing I would say is simply this: not only of whatever happens on November 5, there will be violence either on November 6 or on January 6, 2025. But I want you all to remember this. Donald Trump is very theatrical. And there was another world leader who used theater in his position. I'm not talking, for those who are Canadian, I'm not making a reference to Justin Trudeau, who was a drama teacher before he became a PM. I'm actually talking about, and I'm going to use Godwin's law, aka reference to Hitler and the Nazis here, Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler, because as populists, and notice, Trump kept referring to Viktor Orban, a populist. Populists, they need that drama. He doesn't care. He's not about the policies, and he has always been able to, how can I put it? As a great philosopher of the 21st century said, his name, Curtis Jackson, 50 Cent, you wanted an entertainer president, you got one. That's what we have. We have 40 years of dumbing down America. We have the consequences of a society that has put entertainment, aka toxic entertainment. Of course, we have so many talented Black artists and athletes, but toxic entertainment. We have put consumerism, and we have a return of religiosity, aka put science away, Bible thumpers. This is what has given us a man, such a contradiction to decency, a contradiction to Christian and human values, a contradiction to logic, and yet this man can come back to power because we have millions of people who would rather see him in power than to see a qualified Black woman with all the rightful background to be there.
Wayne, you got last chat.
Second last. Amaya's last.
Oh yeah, Amaya's last. There we go.
Thank you. Listen, our GDP is dependent on the United States, right? If America, sneezes, Canada gets a cold, we need you. 90% of our population lives within 100 miles of the U.S. border. We depend on you. So from a business perspective, America does business with Republicans. America does other things with the Democrats. Now, I'm not saying the Democrats can't do business. Obama had a very good economy up until the wheels came off in 2008, 2009. But about tonight, my last words are this. Kamala did what she was supposed to do. Kudos to her. Trump did what he does. Kudos to him. Now, tomorrow, when you see the reports on both sides of the audience, the right and the left, when you read the media and you see what's going on, I want you to think about how much things have changed since what you talked about with the Black Wall Street and the Pan-Africanist movement and all of that, Harlem Renaissance and all the other things that we did, and how much things have not changed. And then what you're going to do in particular between now and November 5th to insulate yourself politically, economically, and socially so that regardless of who gets into power, you and yours win, because that's what every other culture is doing.
True.
Regardless of who gets in,
Yep.
the people from the different cultures, they're going to be okay. So we need to make sure that if she wins, hey, God bless her. Right? I went to high school with her. Great. Right? Hey, one of my high school alumni, public school, Howard, HU, she went there with my sister. Great.
Yep.
But if she doesn't win, do you have a plan? What's your contingency plan for regardless of who's in power at all three levels of government so that you, your family, and your community win? I think that's really what this debate showed me.
That's why infrastructure is so important.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So whoever.
Maya, go ahead. Sorry, Wayne.
Done. Go ahead.
All right. Yep. Maya, you're closing shop.
It
no
was so
pressure.
funny. I was just scrolling on my Twitter, and this right-wing dude, I don't even know who he is. He talked about the fact that Kamala needs to fix her facial expressions because it perpetuates a female stereotype. Specifically, I think he was talking about like a Black female stereotype, but whatever. But I think it's just funny that he messed up his debate performance so bad that they can't even talk about any sort of policy. They can't talk about what he's going to do. They can't talk about anything of substance. They have to resort to talking about her facial expressions. And it's so funny because I feel like we as Black people all kind of had those same facial expressions because we were just like confused. Like we were so flabbergasted at what he was saying. And a lot of the comments are from white women who are like, I don't like that. Like you're really misogynistic. You're not like this. That's not the vibe. So I feel like at this point, they're just slowly chipping away at whatever support that they have left. And I feel like a lot of those people that they're isolating are going to come out and vote for Kamala. So.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. And I also want to, first of all, I got to thank Ryan Knight for coming up with this conversation a few weeks ago in regards to, so that's why
I'm just a fan of Primetime Saturday.
So, we need to have this discussion, though. We need to have this kind of discussion because nobody's having it, from this perspective of across the Americas, across North America.
Very good.
Oh, true. Yes.
So before we leave, I put it in the comments section, but I'm gonna give everyone's handle. This is where you can get a hold of Aisha. This is how you can get a hold of Lala. This is how you can get a hold of Dr. Tachi. This is Ryan Knight. This is Cesar. And that's Mr. Harris. So, family, I'm gonna propose something. Block off election night.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
That would be really good.
All right.
Yeah,
block off election night. And I'm going to just take a final straw poll. Who feels Ms. Harris is going to win?
I think his base is strong, man.
Who thinks 45 is going to win?
I still think, I don't think she can maintain the momentum, unfortunately. I think it's going to take a lot of her followers to get more hype. They're getting passive because he's floundering, but his base is steady. So,
Ryan, she doesn't
on
need
the ground,
to.
though, people are pretty hype. People are pretty hype here on the ground, though.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. That's good.
Sorry, Ryan, she doesn't need to keep the momentum. Trump just needs to stay Trump.
Okay, yes, yeah. Valid.
Well, I think for me tonight, my question is, I'll be very interested to see what is the undecided thinking after this, because the undecided, I think 45 probably distanced himself more from undecided more than Ms. Harris did, and I have to say,
undecided.
There are no undecided. Sorry,
there are people who just don't want to say who they want to vote for.
Exactly,
because
but there are no undecideds.
All right,
they know.
All right,
Dr. Vibe, there are no undecided. You're either okay with a Black woman in power, or you're okay with a rapist, frauders, insurrectionists, multiple cheater draft. It's from a religious sense, it's as simple as good versus evil, black or white. It's that simple.
Still lots of time, as I agree with Wayne. There's still lots of time on the clock. Talk to us. Talk in November.
Well, from
one
this
last thing.
one last thing, from this perspective, for those of us here, the choices are clear: democracy or dictatorship. Yeah. This is the closest we've ever been to this type of thing. So it's not a game. It's not a joke. Democracy or dictatorship, or you will see what some other countries are starting to experience. And he's promised it. So
I found it interesting him referencing Victor Orban and his
over and over again.
Okay. All right. So, family, gonna take you off one at a time. So goodbye, ladies from Connecticut. Goodbye, Ryan Knight. Goodbye, Cesar. Good night in many ways, Lala. Good night, Dr. Tachi. And adios, Musha Harris. Thanks for coming in. Always appreciated. All right, family, that is it. I don't think you'll see this conversation anywhere else this evening, and that's why we do what we do. So as we finish up, Tony, I want to thank everyone who watches live on the replay. It's appreciated, not taken for granted. And we'll do some few closing things. As always, to advertise your business, product, or service on any of the platforms I'm on, please feel free to email me, dr.vibe@vibeshow.com. Also, subscribe to the Dr. Vibe Show on YouTube and hit the notification button. And also like the Dr. Vibe Show on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. If you want to get a hold of me, if you do, I don't know why, but website address, the drvibeshow.com, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, The Dr. Vibe Show, Instagram at The Dr. Vibe Show, X/Twitter, drvibeshow, and email dr.vibe@thedrvibeshow.com. I think we've got about everything down that we needed to get down. I don't think there's anything else. Let me just check. No, I think we got everything. All right. So this is how I close out all the conversations. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Sometimes you have to get small to get stronger. Block assumptions, then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Love, faith, and respect. And don't just manage your time, manage your energy, and remember to give yourself grace. I want to thank everyone who chimed in. And if you definitely catch the replay. Catch the replay. Oh, and some last comments here. Wayne asks, if 45 wins, will it finally galvanize the Black community? Dr. Tachi says, probably not. And Drea Rich says, good evening. There's no question VP's capacity to maintain momentum. White supremacy is the reason this race is so close. All right. All right. God bless. Peace be well. Keep the faith. Follow me anywhere you can. And that's a wrap. Yeah.